back with Conor Grant for the third part of this Many People interview, and I just want to talk a bit more about your own punting experiences, because I presume you do bet, and I'm informed that you've been involved in racing ownership before.
Yes, I love betting and I love racing. I'm not a particularly successful punter, but that's not the point for me. It's about fun. I really do enjoy it. I tends to be at the weekends when I have a little bit of downtime and I'm watching the racing, or maybe have the odd football bet. I'm not particularly serious bettor by any stretch of imagination. But I was at York at the Ebor last Saturday. I'll bet in every race like every other mug, and I know there'll be lots of people out there, particularly the pros that watch this, going, "Oh my god," But for me, punting, having a bet is my outlet. It's a bit of fun for me. I don't take it too seriously, and I enjoy it. And I enjoy. I've seen Alan Bowden had a Twitter poll which he's very fond of this week, asking 4 questions. Was it the anticipation? Was it the sweat? Was it the result of the afternoon? And it's really the combination of it all. And I think it just it makes there's 2 elements to it. I don't need to sit down and watch a game to have a bet to make the game more enjoyable. But when racing is my passion and it's what I enjoy, and I like having a bet on the racing on a Saturday, and it's really good fun.
On that, and particularly racing, how do you think the game is at the moment in the UK and Ireland specifically? There have been a lot of debates about the health of the sport, things such as the fixture list, things such as sort of the betting quality of certain events and horses moving overseas or whatever. And do you worry about the state of the sport? Is that something that weighs on your mind?
Yes, I do, because I talk to a lot of people in racing, and I think what we all need to be very cognizant of. I think in the past, racing, there's multiple stakeholders and it makes it very complex to get agreements easily in racing. But I think none of us can deny the fact that we're faced with some of the biggest challenges that the racing sector has had for a long time. And I think we've got the issue of scheduling, the dwindling horse racing population, the effect of regulation potentially on the sector. And I think there is a lot that we need to really consider and be very mindful. And I think racing itself has the opportunity to be much more transparent. In 2021, £360 million was put into racing across all of, the bookmaking industry, from marketing, sponsorship, levy, media rights, the whole lot. That's an enormous amount of money. But yet prize money is only 160 million. And it's like, how do we equate this? How do we continue to invest in this sport? How do we continue to see the sport grow? And I think these are big questions that we really have to answer. And I think, racing's at the point where it does need to change. And I think it is changing in terms of its appeal and its proposition. And it's one of these very emotive, particularly maybe it's just the people I follow on social media, where they're constantly endlessly arguing about racing. But I think as a product, it needs to evolve. And I think there needs to be much greater alignment about the number one, sort of opportunity for racing is the schedule. That's where the real opportunity. And I think we can all admit, height season of June, July, then big Saturdays, it's so frenetic, it's impossible to watch all the racing. And you ask yourself, is racing really maximizing its returns at that point? I think there's an opportunity for us to look at it differently. And it's the same with the national hunt season. And I think we are at a situation whereby we really need to sit down. Racing and betting needs to sit down because they're symbiotic. You can't separate them. And in my view, we're the second, outside of the owners, we're the second biggest contributor to racing. So I think, I'm conflicted here in that I have 2 opinions. I've got very much as a fan of the sport, and then as the CEO of a betting company, who's we contributed, as public knowledge, 100 million last year to racing. It's a huge contribution to the sport, and I think it's incumbent on racing and bet to continue to work. And there's been lots of good work happening, and I think it's really important that we continue to evolve to modernize the proposition so we can take advantage of it in the future, and it continues to grow from strength to strength.
do you have any sort of ideas that you think racing should adopt? You will have a view into sort of all of these different jurisdictions around the world. And even, I know you're UK and Ireland are based at the moment, but we can all see what's going on in the UK, the US and Europe, etc. Are there any things that you see overseas that you think that's a great idea, that's a great plan, strategy, whatever? Why doesn't British racing have that?
Like, whether that's overseas or not, I suppose the one thing I've seen overseas, particularly in Australia, is the level of syndication in horse racing ownership that's in Australia versus the UK. I think that, we need to grow the ownership pool of people in the UK. It's quite a small group relative to the size of the industry. The amount of people who own horses, it's quite small. And I think growing syndication is a great way to get people into the sport and grow the sport. And I think Australia has done a particularly good job of that. And I think that's definitely something we should learn. I think the two areas that I come back to answer your real original question about the international dimension where racing is the proposition. What is the customer proposition? And the second thing is the schedule, which I'm not going to let go of that one. But the customer proposition, I think, is really interesting. What we have to do is, and I think racing needs to think about, is it has to start segmenting the audience a lot more. So there's people who go racing who are there for the form, and they would much prefer being at a 2,000-3,000 meeting on a Wednesday than the 40,000 that's crammed into the Ebor or any of the big race meetings, because they just don't find the experience the same. But there are the purists. But there's so many different segments. There's those that go for the social occasion, and how we tailor for all them audiences, I think it's absolutely critical. And I think it's things like within the proposition, we need to demystify the terminology within the sport. It's really complex. The amount of people who go to a race meeting and can't understand a race card, but we don't do anything about it. We don't try to simplify it. And we have to appeal, and it's similar vein for betting. The amount of people who bet in the Grand National or one-off event, and they use an app and they go, this is way too complex. And it's how do we break it down and make it more simpler, the proposition, and really get people behind that. And I think there is a lot of progress happening in the background with certain groups within racing, and I think there's a lot more to do with the proposition. The final point for me really is, and talked about this, is the schedule. And I think we have to really assess how does the sport maximize its returns. And I think the schedule is fundamentally critical to that. And part of that is it's complex to change schedules, but I know there's been a lot of work. People are trying to reduce the fixture list. People are trying to move things around. An example of that for Sky Bet and Gaming was the Sunday series, where Sky Bet backed that as a new opportunity to try and target that Sunday evening audience to see if we could grow the sport in the summer. And it's had some really interesting results for us as a business. And I think there is opportunities for innovation in the sport. And I think that's what we've got to continue to push, that innovation boundary. It's absolutely critical.
And two follow-up questions on that. Firstly, presume that the Sunday series, the plan is very much to do it again next year. It's been very well received in the industry, and also by plenty of people who are betting on it.
That to the best of my knowledge, it only finished last Sunday, and I haven't had any decisions to hear otherwise. But yes, it's to kick on and continue to develop with, all of the partners that have come into that and worked. It's worked really well. ITV have done a fantastic job, and they're doing a great job showcasing the sport and trying to break the sport down more. And again, they get criticized for that, but they are trying to bring it to a broader audience, which is ultimately what racing needs. Whether people like it or not, it needs a bigger fan base.
Lovely stuff. And what are your thoughts on the Racing League, which, because we now have, or we have had for the last 2 weeks, terrestrial racing on a Thursday and a Sunday, and the Racing League is, I wouldn't say the same, but one might say that similar-ish concepts in the sense that you've got good quality handicaps for good prize money in full fields. You found the Racing League, you support that vision that they've got?
Yeah, look, I think for the Racing League, there's been a real commitment to increase prize money, which I think from a racing perspective is really important, because that's what we need for trainers and to go through the whole ecosystem and for the owners. I think it's changed in concept within year and year. And I think even myself, I'm not very close to it. I know there's the captains and the teams and the locations, but I think it needs to keep it as simple as possible for people so they can continue to understand the format. And there's an investment there and a commitment to do this for a number of years. So I think people will need more time to get up to speed. And I think the concept of increasing the prize money and trying to drive that is very much welcome and a great idea and initiative and to be applauded. But I think just keeping it simple, because it's sort of changed year on year, and I think it has caused some confusion from the bits and pieces I've seen. But I think overall as an initiative, it's what racing needs, and it needs to be more of it.
Just I think it's very fair sort of answers. Just a last couple of questions on this. Firstly, as a punter yourself, I don't know if you've ever had any sort of difficulty getting on, but there'll be plenty of people watching this who will be a bit upset that I haven't asked sort of questions about why can't I get my bet on or whatever. Are you finding that you're getting more and more complaints about people for restrictions for any reason now than say 5 years ago or 10 years ago? And do you think that it is going to be a growing problem sort of for the industry, people being turned off because they don't get the betting experience that they think is fair?
This is possibly one of the most hugely emotive topics we were going to discuss, and I'm glad we didn't shy away from it. Like, the reality isn't, I follow many of the professional punters and people on, I love the betting and racing talk on Twitter. And you can see it. And look, anecdotally, it does feel like there seems to be an increase of it, but we're not seeing it in our business. And I think, it causes so much emotional debate. The reality is there's a very, very, very small subset of customers who are actually restricted. There really is. And I think what people forget is if we restrict a customer and we don't restrict the right customer, we're losing revenue. So it's not in our interest to do that. But I think certainly in recent times, there does seem to be a bit more noise around it. William, and I think it's something that, I spoke to my own trading team and said, what is actually going on at the moment? How do we know that there isn't an increase in the spike? And it's something we have to monitor and continue to track, because look, we need these punters, because otherwise the market will ultimately contract. But we can't lose sight of the fact is the reality is for some, they are going to get restricted because they take advantage of offers and promotions that are there for the vast majority. And it's not just the promotions and offers. It's, we're a commercial enterprise, and we have to make decisions that are based on that, and we can't lose sight of that. But I think this issue tends to get blown up a little bit more than it actually is. But I think there's definitely something that we need to look at as an industry and continue to hear what the consumers are saying and making sure we're getting it right. Because if we get it wrong, yeah, I think it is definitely a problem.
Thank you very much for your time today, Conor Grant. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on, and congratulations on a long innings at Flutter UK and Ireland. Thank you for watching this edition of Betting People.